we're reaching up to the top of the tree for the expensive supplement or the expensive workout machine or like all of these biohacks. I'm like, I do not give a shit about any of your biohacks if you are not taking your body through like a basic full range of motion throughout the day. I don't even want to talk about it. I don't care if you're not taking your body out for a walk with regularity and exposing yourself to actual sunlight. Until we're hitting these basic fundamentals of being a human, I don't even want to hear about any of the other stuff.
Welcome to the Betty Rocker Show, the place to be to nourish your mind, love your body, and rock your life. What's up, Rockstar? Welcome back. I am so glad you're here to listen to my conversation with my friend, Aaron Alexander. He's a pioneering manual therapist, movement coach, and the creator of the Align Method, which is a guide to using posture and body alignment to build strength, achieve peak performance, reduce pain, and find a new sense of confidence in yourself. He puts out so many valuable resources, including an epic podcast, his book, The Align Method, and his courses that just really help people live better in their bodies. Join me in welcoming him to the show. Welcome, Aaron. It is so great to have you here. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for doing this. Bree, it's been entirely too long that we've had a face-to-face experience.
I know, it's crazy. And I remember when we met, we were just like geeking out over all the different things that we have shared histories around with everything from body work, manual therapy, caring about the body, movement, how that informs communication, just so many cool experiences that we share and viewpoints, I think.
I love how you set that up. I think oftentimes when people think of the body, I think oftentimes it comes into like abs, or getting chiseled or getting cut or getting stronger, pull-ups, getting faster, but I think that your physical body, it's your container, your vessel that you utilize for every relationship that you engage with and your business relationships and just your experience, your relationship to yourself, your experience in your own skin. So it's such a broader conversation than just like gains. And I think it's interesting how culturally it feels like there's almost like this technological overlay on our relationship to ourselves and our health. It's about optimization, and efficiency and kind of treating the body like a computer, or a set of gears. I think it's a much richer conversation than that. If you're interested in making it be that, really, it's just, the stories we tell ourselves.
Couldn't agree more. And also it's about performance, right? Like we have this expectation of how we appear and how we perform. And I think there are a lot of ways that we can improve the nature of our communication with ourselves. Like I often say that what we choose to eat is like a communication that we're having with the body, and the way that the body feels and responds is its communication back if we're listening. But there's so much more to that communication, like how we're moving, how we're not moving, how we're breathing, all these things that we do sort of unconsciously, but with a little bit of maybe conscious attention to them, we can have a better communication experience.
I think that the term performance is interesting. Like it's a word that I and many people would identify with of like, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to you and following your work, they likely would either place themselves into the category or would ideally like to place themselves into the category of a high performer. And that term, I think in and of itself has so much baggage attached to it, because to be a performer, I think you already know where I'm going with this, but to be a performer, it's like already there's like a film on top of your authenticity. So if you're moving through life of like, how do I, be a high performer? It's just like, how do I just, be with myself?
Yes.
How do I freaking love myself? And then from there, I think that opens up the potential for genuine relationships and genuine expression. And, suddenly your breathing pattern might start to change a little bit. And instead of you kind of like wearing this guise of performance, you can actually, okay, I don't need to perform. I can just be here for a moment and just kind of gather myself. And suddenly your autonomic nervous system presents the opportunity to flip over into that parasympathetic state, and you can rest and digest and repair and, gather your marbles. And then on the opposite side of that actually comes genuine performance, where it's like those quantitative goals that you were seeking before actually, in fact, can come through the paradoxical product of dropping the the I know that we're going like way deep, like metaphysical ramdas early on, but it's interesting.
You just encapsulated like this concept that I think a lot of people have heard from me, which is like your body is the byproduct. How you look and feel is a byproduct of how you treat yourself. And that's what you just so beautifully described at a deeper level, is that all these things we're striving for, which we need other people to validate, that's what performance inevitably becomes when we look at it in that light. When we are constantly striving to be perceived as good enough and all of this baggage that we have attached to that performance word, we lose track of that connection that we have with our inner self. And that conversation, that internal conversation, that inner dialogue, that parasympathetic state, tuning into ourselves, calming the nervous system, that can inform your actual performance, because we don't exist without other people. It's natural to be somewhat performative. It's natural. I mean, we're not demonizing these things. We're simply noting, I think, that when they become the sole focus of what is informing your work or your intention, you miss out on a lot of the potential that you have.
And also, so last night I randomly taught a workshop on contact improvisation, and I've never taught a workshop on contact improv. I'm not like an expert on contact improv, but I was.
What is this?
Contact improv is a thing that was developed by a guy called Steve Paxton in the 70s, and he had a background in Aikido and modern dance, and he created, along with his friends, colleagues, whatever, created this modality of like movement, dance, expression, something that was kind of a blend of these principles of martial arts and Aikido, which involves like, lifting people up off of the ground with your hips and, doing twists and turns and getting up and down off of the ground and moving with levity and finding your center and midline in relation to someone else, all from the lens of improvisation. But within that, I spent the day reflecting on like, what is contact improv? Because I'm like, what the hell am I going to say to these people? And, so something that came up for it was, improvisation is something that you're always doing contact improv with other people. You're always engaging in this movement dance with other people. And the analogy that came up for me was like, I have an electric bike I was driving around Austin, Texas with, and I went down a one-way lane, and I wasn't like in anybody's way. It was fine. But it made this one lady like mad. She's like, oh. She's got all flustered in her car. And I'm like, wow. Like I had this moment, like, that's contact improv. Like I had an expression, like I had my existence there on my bike, and then that visual image went across the street to this gal, and that like disagreed with her worldviews or something. And it moved her into this state. And it's like, wow, like we are dancing and moving and engaging with each other, even if we're not actually like touching hands. We're always engaging with each other.
Yes.
And I think that when you're in that performative state, I think that sometimes it can be like almost like you're having this monologue conversation where you're performing for someone else, but instead of it being this union of relationship with someone, which is so nourishing and so supportive, it's more about just, look at me, or look at me and validate me, because ultimately I feel deeply insecure and I'm, my whole self-worth is hinged upon your acceptance. Mm-hmm. And you don't even really exist to me. You're just like, you could be anybody. It's just that outer acceptance that is actually a deeper representation of fill in the blank thing, mom, dad, whatever. And so that, that would be like an imbalanced kind of like unhealthy type dance where there's not like a listening between the two parties. It's kind of more this narcissistic, it's about me, and even so my performance, it's like, it's kind of for you, but it's really about me.
Right.
So there's another level of performance where it's about the listening to the other person. and it's really about receiving that feedback from what's happening in this room, what's happening in this person, how do they feel, what are their facial expressions, what's their their pace of breathing, where are they breathing, they're like picking up these subtle cues, becoming so interested in other people. And that's why you're successful with business. Like that's why people follow you and engage with your work and want more of you, because you clearly care about other people. You're clearly in the listening of other people.
My contact improv game is strong.
Your contact improv game is strong, because that's what contact improv is. It's me listening, or whoever listening, to the feedback of that person and responding appropriately to be, adequately supportive and responsive. That's everything. Every relationship is contact improv. And it stems from the point of getting out of the way of yourself and being in this monologue, waiting for my turn to speak position, and instead coming from this place of deeply listening, and that's figurative and literal. And then when the opportunity comes for it's okay, now it seems like it's my turn, saying like, okay, this is what's coming up from that experience of really, really actively being engaged with the other person.
This is beautiful. What a wonderful way to start this conversation, because this is a way of speaking about interaction and communication that I don't think we think about very often. I love the aspect of improv, because sometimes it's not your turn to speak and yet you need to interject. And that could be the way, I'm picturing you doing acro yoga with another person, like something on your Instagram, and how you have this, it looks like dancing. It's beautiful. I would love to see this seminar that you were a part of with the contact improv, where, the dancing and this just sounds like.
Yeah, it was filmed. So I'll put
good.
it up on
I really want to see it. But there
point.
Is this thing about the dance that communication is, and there's this communication that we have with ourselves. And I wonder if we could talk a little bit about the breathing and how important our breath is, and why is it that so many of us don't know? If I say, how is it that so many of us don't know how to breathe? What is going on with our breathing? Because of course we know how to breathe. It's automatic. It's part of our autonomic nervous system. But what is it that we could maybe learn about our breath that would help us breathe better and have a better experience?
Yeah, it's such an important question. And that's, breath is interesting because it's this bridge between the autonomic nervous system and your actual conscious choosing mind. So you can actively engage with, okay, how do I want to breathe right now? Should we maybe do like some huffing and puffing breath work stuff? Should I maybe I'll do a breath hold, maybe I won't breathe. Maybe I'll do a long exhalation. Maybe I'll do a long exhalation and make it audible. All of those are going to have different physiological signals to that autonomic, in quotations, side of your nervous system, which isn't truly autonomic, because you can, there was some monk, he was able to change the temperature of two sides of his hands by, I think it was like 10 degrees in a very short amount of time, just
That's
through
amazing.
his consciousness, and so there's similar examples that in like Tumo meditation, monks being out in, some cold mountainous area, and then putting a cold, wet blanket on their backs and them drying it, while it's like below freezing outside, and just doing that, being able to create this internal heat just through the directionality of their mind. So even the idea of, and you can change your, your blood pressure. We have so much more control, or deeper relationship with this autonomic side of ourselves than I think what we're told. It's just a matter of you just have to pay attention. That's a big thing. How's that one go? Where your energy goes.
Where your attention goes, energy flows.
Energy flows. That's the thing. Yeah. So it's like, that's the thing. It's just by paying attention, it starts to open up real estate in those different parts of yourself. Thank you for saving me on that. I was like, I thought
you set me up to sound smart. Thank you, my friend.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I appreciate that. So with the breathing, it's one of those physiological levers that you can pull on to change your felt state in any moment, which is so cool. And that was the whole intention of me putting a book together, and like the programs that I do, and most of the stuff that I share is to share with people that you have access to all of these levers and we call them your senses, or just the way that you move, to literally change your state right now, to make you feel more awake, to make you feel maybe more like down-regulated and ready for sleep, to make you feel more cognizant of what's going on or cognitively clear, and so breathing is one of those things that just a baseline example, like heuristics, that exhalation is going to engage that rest, digest, repair parasympathetic side of the nervous system. That inhalation, think like if you get scared and you get afraid, you go, right? Your shoulders go up, and you might clench your jaw, you might clench your hands, your pupils might dilate. All of those musculoskeletal responses are translations of what's happening at an autonomic level. So when I inhale, I'm sending the signal, okay, we're activating more of that sympathetic side. So if you're a person that's feeling stressed out and you're about to go into some meeting, or maybe you have a date with somebody and you're kind of like, oh man, I feel like stressed. A really beautiful tool would be to play with just, cool, I'm gonna emphasize a long exhalation. And I'm going to do that also in and out through my nose to slow that breathing pattern down even further. And then as I'm breathing through my nose, another layer on top of that is I'm engaging more of those low, deeper diaphragmatic muscles. I'm pulling that air down to the lower lobes of the lungs, which are significantly larger than the upper lobes. And I'm increasing the production of nitric oxide as that air is passing through my nasal passages. There's 30 odd different functions of breathing through the nose.
Wow.
Breathing through the mouth, essentially, it just allows you to get a lot of air really fast. When do you need a lot of air really fast? Pretty much when you're panicking, or you're like in the Align Method book, we call it the fifth gear, which I borrowed that from Brian McKenzie, who's another great thinker in this world, and he helped me review the breathing chapter and help break down some different principles for me in there. And so that fifth gear is great. It's beautiful to access that fifth gear on occasion. But if you're just hanging out at Starbucks, and you're, cranking out some emails, you probably don't need to be in this like panicked fifth gear mode. And you're
right.
If you're beside someone that's breathing in that way, you can hear illness. You can hear disease. That person, literally, it's like, oh my God, like what's wrong with that person?
They're stressed. Their body is stressed.
Exactly. And not only is their body stressed, but they're stressing themselves out with the way that they deal with stress. So if they start to come in and engage with some of their own, autonomy and sovereignty through education and awareness of how to operate this meat suit, they can come in and say, man, I have enough spaciousness to look at myself in this moment and say, I am stressing myself out with my perceived stress. The way that I handle stress is stressful.
Right.
And so you
wait. Let's just give a quick plug to the book, The Align Method, your book, which is so fantastic. That's what we're referencing here. And there are all these incredible tips. And I'm going to put a link in the show notes for the breathing activities that you offer for free. There's like this free guided breathing tool that you can get on Aaron's site that I absolutely love. And I highly recommend. So I'll be putting a link for that for you guys. But the Align Method book is so fantastic, and it has guided pictures, guided exercises, guided visualizations, all these different tools that access your senses. And one of the things that a lot of women write to me about and ask me about is that they can't stop the racing thoughts and it prevents them from falling asleep at night. So would you tell us how can we use our breath and maybe tune in? What is it that we should do when we're laying there and we just can't sleep? We can't stop the racing thoughts. How can we get ourselves into a better sleep state? Because I think this is a huge struggle for a lot of people. And if they recognize their own autonomy in that situation and had something they could do, that might really help.
Yeah, it's such a good question. So I feel like that's actually enough of a bow on just the initial breathing. How do we start to gain some semblance of relationship of how we're breathing and how it affects us? The other side of that would be if you want to get hyped up for a thing, you could do like some Wim Hof or some, like before I did this, I actually did like a really brief little, almost like hyperventilating, and then finish with a breath hold. And all that's in the book as well. And we can include that in the resource that we include for this podcast. But so with the sleeping conversation, that would be saying, okay, one, if you're having trouble sleeping, the first thing, if you're in that moment and you had no preparation, no lead up, you're just like, wow, I'm in a moment, I'm having trouble sleeping. One, releasing the stress of, oh, I'm failing, I'm not sleeping. So when we put ourselves into that double bind of like, oh my God, I can't sleep. Oh my God, I need to get my sleep. It's like you're stacking layers of stress upon stress upon stress. So again, the way that we're handling stress is really flipping stressful.
Right.
So I think a supportive thing within that is like, if you can't sleep, like even the idea that you need to have this perfect 8 hours of sleep every night, this prescribed 8 hours of sleep, like there are some cultures that don't align with that. Like there's some places where it's like, oh, like, we do 6 hours or maybe 7.5 hours to fit your circadian rhythms, or, it depends on what did you eat that day? What's the time of month for you? What season is it? How much work did you put in? How much meditation, mindfulness practice did you do that day? If you've just been sitting, on a cushion meditating like many people do, suddenly it's like, oh, maybe I only need to sleep for 4 hours and that's good. It's fine. So I think that letting go of the prescribed idea of like, this is what perfect sleep looks like. It's like maybe your body is saying it doesn't want to sleep because it doesn't want to sleep right now. Maybe it's a great opportunity to grab a book, maybe like even like a dense book. And, and that's like prescribed I got this from Alan Watts, who's like a dead philosopher that I like. It says when he can't sleep, he reaches and grabs like a really dense book and like digs into it, and allows that extra energy of his mind to kind of get worn out in working through these ideas. Or you could grab maybe a fictional book, and allow your mind to wander into this fictional world. And so I think that one thing is just letting go of the attachment of this is what I need to be doing. This is what I should be doing. And saying
the performance aspect.
Yeah, it's almost like a performance aspect. Yeah, exactly. And so then that's if you're in that point and there's no lead up. If you have a lead up, and you're looking for, and we have a chapter in the book, and I have an online program where I break down all this stuff as well. So the aligned evening, so the aligned evening, or as I would describe it, the lead up for that would be one, paying attention to the light that you're exposed to in your home. So if it's been a very new thing, ever since Edison and Tesla and that whole controversy of the production of light bulbs. Before that, very, very recent in human history. Before that, our circadian rhythms were set to sun comes up in the morning. Once the sun goes down, your only exposure to light was fire. That was it. Once the sun goes down, you get red light and you love it. And it's nurturing and supportive. And, it helps this cascade of sleep hormones, which ultimately leads to, reduction in things like cognitive decline and dementia. And, it allows your body to go into this restorative repair state. When you get that blue light from light bulbs, it's sending the signal, which blue light's amazing during the day. You want blue light during the day. Mm-hmm. Once the sun goes down, especially, call it like a couple few hours before bed, if you're getting that blue light from your light bulbs, you're sending the signal that the sun is rising. So when you're laying in your bed and you're looking at Instagram notifications or watching Netflix without blue blocking glasses or some type of blue tint something or another on the screen, you're literally, it's like physiologically speaking, your body is saying, wow, what a beautiful sunrise. And then whoosh, time to go to sleep.
So perfectly explained. That's awesome.
So just don't do that. Like Get some blue blockers, embrace candles, get salt lamps. Like if you're with a gal or a guy, like a romantic partner, and you want to have like a nice, soothing, romantic evening where you're like, man, I really want to like set the mood with this person. You don't have blaring, blasting blue lights in the room. You essentially do all the things that most logical people would recommend for like a romantic evening with somebody. You'd like light some candles. You'd probably have some salt lamps. You'd like kind of tone down the mood. Why not treat yourself with that same level of appreciation and respect? Like, why not romance yourself? It's 9:00.
I love it.
Like spend some time treating yourself the way that you would treat somebody else that you deeply care about. And then
the aligned evening. I love it.
You got to align
like
your
a date night
evening,
for yourself every night.
Yeah, date night.
Yes.
Self-date yourself. Yeah.
Well, you described my night already. I mean, I'm in bed by 9:00. I'm reading my fictional book. I've got the dog. The lights are dim. The blue blockers are on. But it took me time to learn this. I was chronically stuck, like from working in the hospitality industry for years, of just going to bed at like 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. and just thinking that was the norm.
And if you're in a
it took
scenario,
some conscious work.
Yeah, if you're in a scenario where you have, some like late night shift type thing, and that's how you pay your bills and all that stuff. The important thing from talking on my podcast to like Dr. Michael Bruce and various different people that would be really fantastic experts in the realm of sleep, people that I strongly trust. The consistent suggestion is that your body needs consistent sleep patterns. So if you're getting to bed at 11 every night, or 1 a.m. every night, or 8 p.m. every night, your body will start to adapt to that. And so around that time that you've started to make this consistent pattern for yourself, your body will start to upregulate all of those hormones that indicate it's time to sleep. And then 8-ish hours later, your body will come up on the other side and say, okay, let's get the cortisol and the norepinephrine. They're like, hey, I'm ready to get up. When you're all over the place with your sleep, that's when at a deeper level, your body's just a bit confused. And then you're getting upregulated with the hormones that do one thing when you could have used them 3 hours ago, or 3 hours in the future. The last thing I would throw in there is, so we already included the breath stuff. So include that physiological lever called the way that I breathe into your evening experience. So you could maybe do like a little, I had Dr. Amiti Jha, I think is her name. She's like one of the original mindfulness experts. And her recommendation for me in that podcast / in her book was 12 minutes seems to be like the minimum viable dose for meditation, really leaving a lasting neurological impact. Like we can see it, and so having maybe just say, cool, before I go to bed, like running an experiment with yourself, maybe for 5 days or 10 days or a month bed. I'm just going to set a timer, 12 minutes. And I'm just going to do like a basic following my breath meditation. Anapanasati is like an unnecessary term for that. So just for 12 minutes, gamify it, like make it something that it's not something that's like, oh, I'm failing because I'm thinking about other stuff. Instead, think of it, the way I think of meditation or mindfulness or some type of practice like that, I think of it as like you're literally sharpening the blade of your mind. And every time a new thought comes in, it's amazing. There's no problem with that. That's what your mind does. It spits out thoughts. So not being judgmental or sad or like I'm doing it wrong, just say, cool, a thought. Amazing. Come back to my breath. That's it. That's all. That's the whole thing. And you could even maybe play a game with yourself and say, I wonder how long I can go before a thought comes in. Oh, that was a thought. Back to my breath. You say, okay, cool. And so running that game with yourself, especially I think for like more of like a masculine type personality type, I think sometimes sitting in meditation is just like not man enough. So you can make it a game, and the game, the competition for yourself is how many seconds can I go before another thought squirts out of my thought pump. And then when it happens, okay, cool. That was about 7 seconds. Right. Come back to the breath. All right. Start the game again. Cool. 8 seconds that time. Okay. Back to my breath. And you do that. It's actually kind of fun in a weird way. And you get done with that.
That was beautifully described.
Yeah, I think people have a misunderstanding of meditation, and I think they think that it needs to be this really spiritual thing. Like it can be a video game, like that. Ultimately, like who's to say what is what? The best form of exercise, the best nutritional protocol, the best mindfulness practice is the one that you're going to actually do. So you getting all hopped up on like what the perfect day is and the perfect morning and the perfect workout and the perfect meditation is like, what are you actually going to do? And whatever that is, like, let's negotiate from there and say, cool, like, let's make this consistent, kind of like your sleep. So that would be, I think that just those three would be a fine little breakdown of like the basic aligned evening, or what I would call the aligned evening.
Thank you for that generous tutorial. That's some real practical, applicable knowledge that you just shared there. I absolutely loved your description of meditation because I think it's so true that we often overcomplicate it. We overcomplicate so many things, partly because there's so many competing stimulus inputs of here's how to do this, here's how to do that. Different things work for different people at different times, right? So try on different things, but I just like to simplify it when it comes to meditation. So thanks for that really great explanation. When it comes to movement and movement patterns, one thing that I was recently reading on Dr. Huberman's feed, on his Instagram feed, was he'd been talking to some cardiologist friends, and they were saying how, and for those of you who don't know, Dr. Huberman is a Stanford professor. He's a neuroscientist. He's just got all this great information. And anyway, so he's talking to some cardiologist friends, and they're talking about how people who do their workout, like their 3 workouts a week, and then they go and sit for more than 5 hours a day, are basically negating their workout, like the effect of their workout. But if they would simply stand more, or stand in a 1-to-1 sitting to standing ratio, and like get out for more walks, that they would actually be able to harness more of the benefits, and that their lives would improve. Yeah. You, I think, are a real expert in this subject of movement therapy and primal movement, and just how we can get more into the body. Can you enlighten us a little bit about your process and thoughts around movement and how important it is?
Yeah, I agree with all that. And I love Andrew. We just had a sauna session together a few days ago, and we're discussing some of the random things of this sort. And I just have so much admiration and appreciation for his mind, and would highly recommend anyone go check his stuff out if you haven't already. And Ditto. He reviewed the vision chapter in the Align Method book as well, which I'm very just immensely grateful for. Sitting's not a problem. Like, the idea of a resting position is immensely valuable for the human organism.
Right.
Like, humans are inherently lazy. We are looking to conserve energy anywhere that we can. And so if you are just a person you're actually living in some hunter-gatherer ancestral type environment, and you're just always throwing your hands up over the air and doing jumping jacks and doing bench press, and like, it would be wildly inefficient usage of calories. So what you're going to do when you're not hunting or gathering or procreating or building shelter or tending to your offspring or playing, which play is a part of that pie. Play isn't extra. Play is a part of your humanity. It's a part of your nutrition. So is touch. So when you're not engaging in those parts, you're in resting positions. And even when you are engaging in most of those parts, you're interlaying resting positions into all of that. And so the difference is the modern man and woman's overarching resting position is just this one consistent archetypal hunched over forward head posture, shoulders kind of collapse forward. Now have the hand stuck in this holding the cell phone position, pelvis tucked underneath like a sad puppy dog, knees dropping in valgously, and just kind of like, boom. That position times a minute is beautiful. It's like actually healthy. That position times 1,000 hours on repeat becomes incredibly detrimental to the human form and the human psychology and the human hormonal system and like every aspect of you. So that position, if you were to take away they're sitting in a fancy Range Rover car, or they're holding a fancy laptop computer doing important things, or they're sitting in their $5,000 couch, and they're looking into their flat screen TV in that same position. We look at those positions and we're like, oh, cool. Like, man, that person's killing it. If you strip away all the story of what's going on there, what you see, if that was just like a primate or a human, but you didn't see what they were doing, you were just looking at them structurally, what does their body language indicate? You'd say, oh, that person is probably sick, or that person is probably sad, or that person is maybe depressed. And so how does the body respond to those positions? One, it's just a disadvantageous position to move from. You're putting the joints at a mechanically unsound position, and you're practicing that position with repetition. So when you're sitting or in a resting position, the way that people in like Hadza tribes, for example, which have been studied by the University of Southern California, researchers went out there and attached some devices to their hips and knees to measure how much they move throughout the day. The average was 9.82 hours each day, which is very similar to industrialized populations. The difference is the way that they're in resting positions is they are in squatting positions, they are in kneeling positions, they are in floor sitting positions, which we outline in the Align Method book and also the Align Method online program. Because, and the reason that I'm so like emphatic about all of this stuff is because it's these big juicy red apples of low-hanging fruit that's sitting right in front of us culturally. and we're reaching up to the top of the tree for the expensive supplement or the expensive workout machine or the like all of these biohacks. I'm like, I do not give a shit about any of your biohacks if you are not taking your body through like a basic full range of motion throughout the day. I don't even want to talk about it. I don't care if you're not taking your body out for a walk with regularity and exposing yourself to actual sunlight. Until we're hitting these basic fundamentals of being a human, I don't even want to hear about any of the other stuff. And it's not like in a dogmatic way. Like, sure, I'd love to hear about it. I think it's interesting, la la la. But as far as like if we're really like investing in a plan to get the most out of this human experience, like I don't even want to reach the top of the tree until we've really exhausted all of the low-hanging fruit. And so the baseline for that would be, just make sure your body's going through full range of motion. It's not complicated. And there's a book by a guy called Philip Beach called Muscles and Meridians that I've kind of has influenced a lot of my thinking in this whole conversation. And he refers to these positions, essentially that just like outline that lots of people / anybody living in, like a non-chair saturated world. He calls them archetypal postures of repose. And those archetypal postures of repose, essentially, it's like they're tuning positions. Because if you really look at normal statistically in an American statistical lens would be gradual increase in usage of anti-anxiety medication, gradual increase in use of antidepressant medication, self-harm, like obesity. I think by 2030, over half of the population said to be obese. At this point, it's over a third, and over half is overweight. You do not want to be an American statistic. You do not want to be normal in America. Like if you want more out of this human experience, listen to Brie, listen to Betty Rocker,
listen to Aaron Alexander. I love when you identify things that are hidden in plain sight for us, because being able to upgrade our movement patterns is something that we all have. It's free. It's available to you, just like working on your breathing. It's a free thing and available to you. You just have to know how to do it and what to do and start to become aware of the patterns that you're holding yourself in. So if you're sitting in a chair with your legs bent and you're back-rounded forward, like Aaron was saying, I mean, there's real evidence that not only does this forward-rounded shoulder posture and head forward posture, that's a posture that we get into when we are actually depressed and down. We can conversely begin to feel depressed and down by habitually holding these postures and these positions, and it's not good for us at all. So having the ability to do these different, what did you call the core movements? That was a cool phrase or term you used for that.
Archetypal postures of repose.
I love that. I love hearing that said out loud and explained. And I'm sitting currently cross-legged on my couch, and I moved into a squatting position on my couch while we were speaking, and often am standing at my standing desk on my vibe plate throughout the day, or sitting. I'm moving through different positions throughout the day because I fortunately work from home, but I'm constantly really happy when I hear from people who work in an office where they're invited to move more frequently, to stand at their desk, to have opportunities to go outside for a walk at lunchtime. One of the greatest things I ever did for my own movement was getting a dog, walk him in the morning. I go for a walk at lunch, go for a walk in the evening. I mean, there's my 3 walks right there. But then there's other movement throughout the day too around play. And I hope you'll talk more about play, because not only, and we were speaking about Dr. Huberman a minute ago, but that's something we talk a lot about with neuroplasticity and how important play is for keeping us young and learning. But it's also such an important part of unstructured movement. And why is that so vital for us?
Yeah. Your questions are really like to the core of things. I really appreciate it. So wrapping up the previous part of changing your environment so that you can just naturally, I don't know, it sounds maybe a little out there, but inhabit yourself more effectively. Think of like, how do I live inside of this body? Maybe it would be too far of a step to maybe like eat your lunch or drink tea and get a low coffee table, like Japanese style coffee table, and get floor cushions in your place, which I don't think that should be too much. But, if that's like, it's crazy, or I'm in some working environment, someone else controls it. I'm not able really to control that. You're sitting on a couch. I'm sitting beside a couch right now. I have a couch in my place. And you're sitting on a couch as though it's the floor. So it doesn't need to be any kind of like, you have to become this heretic that wears Vivo 5-finger shoes and, doesn't wear deodorant and, threw their couch out. Like, it does not need to be that. You can interject or interweave these healthy lifestyle patterns into the modern environment. It's just, you need to have the education. Because if you just allow yourself to be educated by the mold of modernity, you will become a statistical trend of modernity. Not putting a moralistic judgment, saying modernity is bad, good. Statistically, here it is. Choose the train you'd like to get on. But there is a way to combine. And I'm not suggesting anyone, like, if you're not sitting on the floor specifically, then, your body's going to fall apart. It's just taking those principles and interjecting them into, your normal, in quotations, life. Play. So play is, it's literally, you could consider it like a nutrient. So you see animals throughout nature, not just dolphins, even ants engage in play with each other. Like, most critters that have some level of intelligence, a part of their life, which it doesn't make any sense from like a predator-prey perspective. Because when you are playing in nature, when you're like monkeying around, you're making yourself vulnerable to predators. It doesn't make sense unless there's some other evolutionary value there. And so when we're playing with each other, there's a researcher, he's like one of the primary researchers in the field of play. His name is Jacques Panskep, and he's notorious or famous famous among like nerds for tickling rats. And he's like, wow, these little rats giggle. So he looked, I think he took like a little pencil eraser, tickle these rats. And they like had these little rat laughs and whatnot. And he just studied how rats engage with each other in play. And he even found a separate system in the brain, that's particularly distributed for this act of play. So it's like you have a system inside of you available, like neurological real estate for play. And so when we are playing, it's one of the fastest things to drop our nervous system out from a state of fight, flight, panic, scarcity into a place of that, autonomic, parasympathetic, calm, rest, digest, like, that social engagement. This gets into the work of Stephen Porges, he popularized the idea of polyvagal theory. There's multiple strands of the vagus nerve. And a lot of his research is based around this social engagement system. He refers to it as, when we're in that social engagement system and we're just and play doesn't need to be kickball. Play could be the way that you have a conversation with somebody. And when we're engaging, there's a certain playful banter. That in and of itself, the difference between being in a workspace where your boss, in quotations, kind of interjects this playfulness into it, compared to being in a place where that's just exclusively work. Like, there's so much more longevity and creativity and health and robusticity in that flexible work environment where it's like, I don't even really go to work. I go to play and we get work done. So that's the juice. And so there's evolutionary value in play from, if you are playing with other people, obviously you're honing in your motor coordination systems and your hand-eye coordination, and you're learning how much is too much, so there's a lot of like understanding, empathy, and compassion for somebody else, attuning to someone else in real time. If you're doing rough and tumble play with somebody and suddenly you notice a switch in their eyes, or they notice like they feel maybe sad, or they feel any of that, you're like, oh, you're learning what it means to push too much, and you're also learning what it means to not push enough. So again, it's like the fastest way for you to understand how to, in a healthy way, relate to culture as an adult. If you take play off of the table for a young being, you are stunting them to a massive degree. Like just allowing the organism to go out and make mistakes and play and learn and that cycle is what makes a healthy, robust human being or ant or dolphin or monkey. And then continuing that into the workspace, then it's like, oh, interesting. Just the way that was a healthier child because it was able to be in this explorational, I'm able to make mistakes, type mindset because it's like improvisation. It's not, we don't need to do it perfect, right? We just need to do it in the way that really like feels inspiring. You're like, oh man, like
engaging.
Yeah. Like, okay, interesting. That wasn't exactly the way that it's been done for the last 20 years, but that felt right. It's like, oh, that's what we call innovation. Right? So to be in that mindset, it's invaluable for the evolution of the human species, for the success of your business. So you just becoming a cog, a perfect, like automaton that just does things like a worker bee. And it's just, yep, this is what it is. Yep, I got another widget. There's value in that for a computer. But I think that to go a level deeper, if you want to keep up with the way that things are changing, I think having that playful, creative mindset, it doesn't just feel good for your health. It's also, what could likely, be the difference between a prosperous career and becoming obsolete.
That reminds me too of what you were saying about your approach to meditation and how playful you made it. You gamified it. I loved that. That was, there's so many ways to apply that creative mindset to things that you already do, a way to look at them with curiosity instead of judgment of how perfectly you're performing. Instead, to invite yourself to be curious and playful and exploratory. Like Aaron said, innovative. I love that word too. There are many ways that we can apply that creative, playful approach. And this all came to mind because I was thinking about how much I enjoy having a dog. I enjoy taking him for walks. I enjoy playing with him and learning, what he likes and, how to make up fun things to do. And it's the same with other people. And it's so important, such an important aspect of our humanity. I love that your methodology is encompassing of all of these different aspects of what it means to be a human and how we can get more out of our human experience and live at a deeper level, serve at a deeper level, love at a deeper level. It's really powerful. And I know how much my listeners are going to enjoy experiencing more of your work. And I wanted to ask you, because my audience loves challenges. We all over here love a challenge. I wondered if you would leave us with a challenge that we could do over the next week or so to keep you and your work in our mind.
Yeah, for sure. Also, there'll be like one soft doing, non-doing. So the soft doing, non-doing would be just having compassion for yourself with where you're at, and giving yourself 1 week, or one moment of an opportunity to not be in a place of like what you should be or who you should be like, but just acknowledging that you were a goddamn survivor to have arrived at this point, and acknowledge that we're all going through, be kind, for everyone is fighting a great war inside, or however that quote goes, and like you've done it, like you to be at this point now, just to the point of being even interested in listening to a conversation like this, to make it to this point in the conversation like this, like that's beautiful. Like that's even just that in and of itself puts you into a place of intention and, or development or consciousness or any of that to be at that point in your life. I think that's great. And then like the hard to do would be just hang each day. There's a whole chapter in the Align Method book as well about the value of hanging. You don't need to do pull-ups. You don't need to do, leg raises. You can do, whatever you want, but just getting your arms up above your head, just like any kind of yoga practice or a lot of dances or Pilates or any of that would have a lot of time, hands up overhead, grab a bar and just have a little decompression for a total of, for the challenge. And this is in the book, 90 seconds per day. And so that could be 15 seconds 6 times. That could be 10 seconds. Just when you walk through your doorway, do a little hang, have a little breath, a little decompression, maybe a long exhalation, maybe even an audible exhalation. You might feel your spine pop a couple of times. You might feel like some spaciousness open up in your intercostal muscles and your ribs. And you might just feel this like, wow, like I think I just grew half an inch in 20 seconds. Wow. What if I just keep doing that for the rest of the day and the rest of the week and the rest of the month and the rest of my life. Like how would that aggregate? And there's a orthopedic surgeon called Dr. John Kirsch. And something that he found was that 99% of the patients that he would see for shoulder surgery for some type of impingement related syndrome, so they're having shoulder pain, couldn't get their arm up overhead. He said by going through a basic shoulder protocol, which we break down in the Lie Method book and also in the program, he was able to relieve patients, or they were able to relieve themselves of pain entirely and recover full range of motion.
Wow.
Just by taking themselves through this really basic hanging protocol and then adding a few supplemental exercises. Nothing complicated, nothing crazy. And so once again, that mindset, it's looking at, okay, interesting. I'm not doing the baseline things to keep my, in this case, the structure and function of my shoulder girdle and my neck, and even that all that's connected into your visceral tissue and your heart and your lungs. It's all connective tissue in there. So if that's bound up and compressed and impinged, the function will be diminished. So just having a moment of, having that space, not just for the shoulder girdle, but for your whole entire body, your central nervous system, your spine, your heart, that really starts to add up for a person. And so until a person is doing those baseline, low-hanging fat apples that are just sitting right in front of you, I don't even want to talk about any of the fancy biohacks that you're going to start hitting your shoulder with, or resolving your forward head posture, or resolving your, all of the things. Like, do the baseline, fundamental, pretty much absolutely free basics first. Make sure you've exhausted those opportunities, and then let's talk about stem cells, and then let's talk about all the other stuff. And I think stem cells are cool too. I've actually used stem cells. I find them very interesting. So that would be the thing. It's 90 seconds per day for 5 days, and just see how you feel. If it doesn't make any difference, then stop doing it. But I would come very close to guaranteeing you will feel a dramatic difference in just a week of doing that.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that awesome challenge. That's actually something I'm not currently doing, and I'm going to start today. So thank you for that awesome tip.
And making it so it's not like, I like to get away from giving people chores to do, and realizing that by you just placing a pull-up bar into a doorway that you walk through with regularity, there's no doing there. Like, it's a nice experience to walk through and say, like, you know what? I'm just going to swing through the doorway. Like, that's there's no, oh man, I'm going to do, hold leg raises and like, it's like, no. Like, I'm saying this is just a nice, pleasant additive to integrate into your life. This isn't adding another doing, because most people probably feel already exhausted enough with all the doing that they're doing. So that general mindset, where else can you start to integrate that into your world? Make these healthier, in quotation, choices, which health originally, if the origination of that word, the etymology of it comes back to just whole. So how can I make my day more whole, where I'm integrating these healthy, way that we understand the word healthy practices, and integrate that into, again, my relationships and my business and my lifestyle. That wholeness, that integration, that congruence, I think that's really the key. It's just something like throwing a pull-up bar into your office space for your, people that you work with, or into your doorway in your house. It seamlessly makes you a better person, and there's no work doing. It's like your arms are invited to raise up above your head as you're walking through the doorway. It's almost like you didn't do anything. It just happened.
Yes. So much yes. I love it. Thank you. Thank you for all that generous and helpful guidance that you shared with us with the hanging challenge, and all the generous and helpful guidance that you shared with us on this conversation as well. Thanks for being here, Aaron, and thanks for all the great work that you do. And I look forward to talking to you again very soon, my friend. Thank you so much for joining us today, Rockstar. And be sure to leave a comment on the show notes page at thebettyrocker.com/podcast, where you can find all the links and resources we mentioned in the show. Now, coming up next, I am very excited to tell you that we have the one and only Dr. Stacy Sims coming back for round 3 of our show. She's one of my most popular guests, and the information she shares about women-specific training, hormone health, and nutrition strategies for women at every life stage are just so fantastic and so relevant. She's got a new book coming out for peri and postmenopausal athletes called Next Level, and in our upcoming conversation, we'll be diving into that, plus a wide range of topics about women's health and fitness that will be totally relevant to your daily life, no matter what stage of life you are at. I cannot wait to share it with you. So till next time, I'm Betty Rocker, and you are so awesome and amazing. I'll talk to you real soon.
This podcast is for information purposes only. Statements and views expressed on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Brie Argetsinger, Betty Rocker Inc., and the producers disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. Before starting a new exercise, fitness, or health protocol, or if you think you have a medical problem, always consult a licensed physician.